They say, you can't be afraid of what you can't see. But what happens when you can hear it? When you can feel the air shift as it moves past you? When you lie in the darkness and hear breath that isn't yours, so close you can feel the warmth of it on your skin? Some presences don't need to be seen to be terrifying. And some horrors are made worse by their invisibility because your imagination fills in what your eyes cannot. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm a sleep study technician at Riverside Medical Center. Ironic, isn't it? I spend my nights monitoring other people's sleep, watching brain waves and oxygen levels, making sure patients with sleep disorders get the treatment they need. But for the past 3 weeks, I haven't slept at all, because every time I close my eyes, I hear it. Breathing that isn't mine, coming from somewhere I can't see. From someone who shouldn't exist. It started on September 3rd. A Tuesday night that seemed no different from any other. I'd finished my shift at the hospital at midnight, driven home to my apartment in the converted warehouse district downtown, collapsed into bed around 12:45 a.m. I lived alone, had for the past 5 years since my divorce. My apartment was a studio loft with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large industrial windows that let in streams of city light. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Quiet, private, safe. Or so I thought that first night. I woke around 3:17 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Not my own breathing. I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. Listening with every fiber of my being. This was someone else's breath. Deep, steady, rhythmic. The breathing of someone in deep sleep. It was coming from right beside my bed. I lay frozen, staring into the darkness, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my chest. The breathing continued, undisturbed by my waking. In, out, in, out. A slow, peaceful rhythm that should have been soothing but instead filled me with primal terror. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I nearly knocked it over. The light blazed on, flooding the room with harsh yellow illumination. Nothing. My apartment was exactly as it should be. My bed against the far wall. My desk with its scattered papers and cold coffee. My small kitchen area. Bathroom door, slightly ajar. Everything normal. Everything empty. But the breathing continued. I sat up slowly, scanning every corner of the room. The sound was so close, maybe 3 feet from my bed. Right at standing height. As if someone were standing there looking down at me. But there was no one. The space beside my bed was empty air. Hello, I called out, my voice cracking. Is someone there? The breathing didn't change, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge me at all. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the apartment. Nothing, no one. Checked the door locked from the inside, deadbolt engaged. Windows locked, 3rd floor. No fire escape nearby. Closet empty except for my clothes. Bathroom empty. I stood in the middle of my apartment, phone light cutting. Through the darkness, listening to someone breathe who wasn't there. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Complete silence. I waited, barely breathing myself, but the sound didn't return. After 20 minutes of standing there like an idiot, I convinced myself I'd been dreaming. A hypnagogic hallucination? I learned about them at work. Sometimes when you're between sleep and waking, your brain plays tricks on you. Auditory hallucinations are common. That's what I told myself as I climbed back into bed. That's what I told myself as I lay awake until dawn, too terrified to close my eyes. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 3:17 a.m. Same sound deep. Steady breathing right beside my bed. Same terror flooding my system like ice water in my veins. This time, I didn't turn on the light immediately. I lay there in the darkness, listening, trying to analyze it, with the clinical part of my brain that had been trained to observe and document sleep phenomena. The breathing was consistent, approximately 12 breaths per minute, normal resting rate for an adult. The sound quality suggested a male, based on the depth and resonance. There was a very slight wheeze on the exhale, barely noticeable, the kind you might get from mild seasonal allergies. I was analyzing the breathing pattern of something that didn't exist. "Who are you?" I whispered into the darkness. The breathing continued, unchanged. "What do you want?" "Nothing. just that steady, peaceful breathing. I turned on the light. The breathing stopped instantly. The third night, I tried something different. I set up my laptop on my desk with the webcam pointed at the space beside my bed. If something was there, if someone was somehow getting into my apartment, I'd have proof. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing. I lay perfectly still, not turning on the light, letting the camera record. The breathing continued for exactly 7 minutes, then stopped. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, there was nothing. It's just me lying in bed, reacting to something the camera couldn't capture. But I could hear it on the recording. Faint but unmistakable breathing that shouldn't exist. I showed the recording to my colleague, Dr. Anita Patel, during our lunch break at the hospital. "Marcus, you look terrible," she said, her dark eyes full of concern. "When's the last time you actually slept?" "Listen to this," I said, ignoring her question. I played the recording on my phone. She listened, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. "I don't hear anything except you moving around. The breathing. You can't hear the breathing?" "What breathing?" "Marcus, there's nothing there." I played it again, turning up the volume. To me, it was crystal clear, someone breathing deeply, right next to my microphone. But Anita just shook her head. "I think you're experiencing auditory hallucinations from sleep deprivation," she said gently. "You're a sleep tech, you know what chronic insomnia does to the brain. You need to see someone." "I'm not hallucinating," I insisted. "It's real. It's there every night at 3:17 a.m. Then set up a proper sleep study. Come in as a patient. Let us monitor you. We'll see what's really happening." I considered it. Maybe she was right. Maybe my brain was misfiring from lack of sleep. But something, deep in my gut, told me this was real, that something was in my apartment, something I couldn't see, but could definitely hear. That night, I decided to stay awake. If I was awake when 3:17 a.m. arrived, maybe I could catch it in the act. Maybe I could understand what was happening. I sat at my desk, laptop open, working on paperwork to keep myself alert. I made coffee. I did jumping jacks. I slapped my face when I felt drowsiness creeping in. 3:16 a.m. I watched the clock on my laptop tick over 2. 3:17. Nothing happened. 3:18 a.m. Still nothing. I waited until 4 a.m. No breathing. No sounds at all, except the normal ambient noise of the city outside my windows. Relieved and exhausted, I finally went to bed at 4:30 a.m. At 5:47 a.m., exactly 90 minutes later, one complete sleep cycle, I woke to the sound of breathing. It had waited for me to fall asleep. Whatever this was, it wanted me unconscious. It wanted me vulnerable. That realization terrified me more than anything else. Over the next week, I tried everything. I slept at different times. It always came 90 minutes after I fell asleep. I tried sleeping on my couch. It appeared there too, right beside me. I even checked into a hotel for one night and woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of breathing in the hotel room. It wasn't tied to my apartment. It was tied to me. I stopped eating. My hands shook constantly. I saw shadows move in my peripheral vision. At work, I made mistakes, simple data entry errors, falling asleep during monitoring sessions. Dr. Patel pulled me aside again. "Marcus, you need help. This isn't sustainable. You're going to hurt yourself or a patient." "I can't sleep, Anita. Every time I sleep, it comes." "What comes? Please, talk to me." "What do you think is happening?" I looked at her kind, concerned face and knew she wouldn't understand. How could she? Couldn't hear it. The recordings didn't pick it up clearly enough for others to hear. I had no proof except my own deteriorating mental state. I think. I started, then stopped. How did I explain this? I think something is following me, something that only exists when I'm asleep. Or maybe something that only I can perceive. Like a presence. Like something that breathes. She was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, I'm going to suggest something, and I need you to really consider it. I think you should take medical leave. Get some rest. See a therapist who specializes in sleep disorders and trauma. This level of sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, even psychotic breaks. I'm worried about you. It's not a hallucination, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Was it? How could I be sure anymore? My grip on reality was fraying at the edges. The line between what was real and what was sleep-deprived, delusion was blurring. That night, I tried sleeping pills. Strong ones, prescribed by my doctor for the insomnia I'd described. Maybe if I was deeply unconscious, I wouldn't wake up. Maybe I'd sleep through whatever this was. I took 2 pills and lay down at 11 p.m. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the breathing. But this time was different. The medication made me groggy, trapped between sleep and waking. I could hear the breathing clearly louder than ever, as if whatever was doing it had moved even closer. But I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, locked in place by the medication, while my mind screamed in terror. The breathing grew closer. I could feel warmth on my face, like someone leaning over me, like someone studying me while I lay helpless. Then I felt it, pressure on my chest. Light at first, then heavier, as if invisible hands were pressing down. The breathing grew excited, faster, no longer the peaceful rhythm of sleep, but something else. Something that sounded almost hungry. I tried to scream but couldn't. Tried to move but couldn't. Tried to do anything but couldn't. The pressure increased. I couldn't breathe. My chest was being crushed by something I couldn't see, while breathing that wasn't mine filled my ears, just as I thought I would suffocate. I managed to force my eyes open, and I saw it, not clearly, just a shimmer in the air above me, like heat distortion, like the visual artifact of something that wasn't quite solid, a vaguely human shape, tall and thin, leaning over me with its hands, or whatever it had instead of hands pressed against my chest. It had no face that I could see, no features. Just that shimmer in the air and the sound of breathing and the crushing weight on my chest. The moment I saw it, it released me and vanished. I gasped for air, rolling off the bed, scrambling away until my back hit the wall. My chest ached. When I pulled up my shirt, there were marks, faint red impressions, like fingerprints, but wrong. Too long, too many. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and took pictures of the marks. Finally, proof. Finally, something others could see. But even as I photographed them, they were fading. Within minutes, they were gone completely, as if they'd never existed. I didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. I survived on coffee and energy drinks and pure adrenaline-fueled terror. At work, I was a zombie, going through the motions. Barely functional, Dr. Patel cornered me in the break room on the 3rd day. "You're done, Marcus. I'm sorry, but I can't let you continue like this. You're being placed on mandatory medical leave, effective immediately. Go home, get help. Don't come back until you're well." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. She was right. I was falling apart. I drove home in a daze, went up to my apartment, and stood in the middle of the room, staring at my bed. I couldn't do this anymore. Whatever this thing was, it was killing me slowly. 3 weeks of almost no sleep was pushing me toward complete physical and mental collapse. I needed answers. I needed help. And I needed it from someone who might actually believe me. That's when I thought of Professor Elena Rodriguez. I'd met her 5 years ago at a sleep medicine conference. She was a researcher specializing in what she called anomalous sleep phenomena, sleep experiences that couldn't be explained by conventional science. Lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis, night terrors, and other things that existed in the gray area between psychology, neurology, and what some might call the paranormal. The psychiatric community generally dismissed her work as pseudoscience. But I remembered her presentation. She'd shown cases of people experiencing persistent, unexplainable phenomena during sleep. She didn't mock them or immediately diagnose them as delusional. She listened. She investigated. I found her email in my old conference materials and sent her a message. Pouring out everything that had happened, I expected no response, or at best a referral to a psychiatrist. Instead, she called me within an hour. "Mr. Chen, I read your email. I'd like to meet with you immediately. Are you available today?" "Yes," I said, not even caring that I sounded desperate. Good. I'm in the city for a research project. I can be at your apartment in 2 hours. Do not sleep before I arrive. This is important. Do not fall asleep. Trust me, that won't be a problem. Professor Rodriguez arrived exactly 2 hours later. She was in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything. She carried 2 large equipment cases and a notebook. Thank you for seeing me, I said as I let her in. Thank you for contacting me. Your case is, well, let's just say it's exactly the kind of thing I've been researching. She set down her cases and looked around the apartment. This is where it happens. Wherever I sleep, but yes, most often here. And it started 3 weeks ago. Nothing unusual before that? Nothing. My life was completely normal. She pulled out her notebook. Walk me through a typical episode. Every detail you can remember? I told her everything, the exact time it started, the sound of the breathing, the way it stopped when I turned on lights, the pressure on my chest, the shimmer in the air, everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in rapid shorthand. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Chen, I'm going to tell you something that might sound insane, but I need you to listen with an open mind. She looked at me intently. I don't think you're hallucinating. I think you're experiencing a genuine phenomenon. Something is following you. Something that exists in the liminal space between waking and sleeping. What is it? That's what we need to find out. But I've documented similar cases, 12 of them over the past 20 years. Invisible presences that appear during sleep. They're drawn to certain people for reasons we don't fully understand. And they feed on something. Feed. Feed on what? The prevailing theory is that they feed on the boundary state itself. The moment between consciousness and unconsciousness. They need you asleep but aware, that's why they wake you. They're feeding on your fear, your confusion, your vulnerability in that state. I thought about the pressure on my chest, the way the breathing had sounded almost hungry. How do I stop it? That's complicated. These entities, for lack of a better word, are persistent. Once they've attached to someone, they don't let go easily. But there are methods. The people in my other cases, the ones who survived. I interrupted. What happened to the ones who didn't? She met my eyes. They stopped sleeping entirely. The human body can only go so long without sleep. Eventually they had psychotic breaks. Some died. Some are in institutions. The weight of that settled on me like a stone. But, she continued, the ones who found ways to cope, learned to manage the entity. Most of them are living normal lives now. It's possible to coexist with this. It's possible to survive. How? First, we need to document it properly. I have equipment that might be able to capture evidence your camera couldn't, and we need to understand what it wants. Why it chose you? There's always a reason, Mr. Chen. Always. She spent the next hour setting up equipment around my apartment. Electromagnetic field detectors, audio recorders with multiple microphones, even what she called a spirit box, a device that scanned radio frequencies, supposedly allowing entities to communicate. I know how this looks, she said as she worked. Like ghost hunting. But this is legitimate research. We're trying to measure phenomena that exist outside our normal perceptual range. Sometimes that requires unconventional tools. I don't care if you set up a Ouija board at this point, I said. I just want answers. When everything was set up, she turned to me. Now, I need you to do the hardest thing you've done in weeks. I need you to sleep. I can't. If I sleep, I'll be right here monitoring everything. You won't be alone. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can establish communication with whatever this is. Find out what it wants. And if we can't, then at least we'll have data. Information is power, Mr. Chen. Right now, you're fighting an enemy you don't understand. Let's change that. I looked at my bed, that place that had become a source of terror instead of rest. Every fiber of my being screamed not to do this. But Professor Rodriguez was right. I couldn't keep running. Couldn't keep fighting blind, okay? I said. I'll try. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, lights on. with Professor Rodriguez sitting in a chair beside me, surrounded by her equipment. She had headphones on, monitoring the audio feeds, her eyes on the various screens and meters. "Just relax," she said. "Let yourself drift. I've got you." Relaxing seemed impossible, but exhaustion was a powerful force. I'd been running on fumes for weeks. Now, with someone watching over me, someone who believed me, I felt the tiniest measure of safety. My eyes grew heavy. I fought it, but my body was shutting down whether I wanted it to or not. I fell asleep. I woke to the breathing. 3:17 a.m., according to the clock. Exactly 90 minutes after I'd fallen asleep, but this time was different. This time, Professor Rodriguez was here, witnessing it. I looked over at her. Her eyes were wide, her hand frozen halfway to one of her instruments. She could hear it too. "It's here," I whispered. She nodded slowly, then began adjusting her equipment. The EMF detector was going crazy, lights flashing, the needle pegging at the maximum reading. One of her other devices, something she'd called a full-spectrum camera, was showing shapes on its screen. Infrared signatures that shouldn't exist. The breathing continued. Steady and close. "We need to try to communicate," Professor Rodriguez said quietly. She picked up her spirit box and turned it on. Static filled the room, radio frequencies cycling rapidly. "If there is a presence here, we want to talk to you," she said firmly. "We mean no harm. We simply want to understand. Can you hear us?" The breathing stopped. In the sudden silence, the spirit box static seemed deafening. Professor Rodriguez and I looked at each other, then, through the static, a voice. "Yes." No. The word was distorted, broken across multiple frequencies, but unmistakable. "What is your name?" Professor Rodriguez asked static. Then, "Name. Forgotten." "Long time." "So long, why are you here? Why have you attached to Marcus?" More static. The voice came through stronger now, as if it was learning how to use the device. Recognized him. Knew. What he did? I felt ice flood my veins. What I did? What are you talking about? The EMF detector spiked even higher. The breathing started again, but faster now. Agitated. "You were there. The hospital. You watched. You did nothing." Professor Rodriguez looked at me. "Marcus, what is it talking about?" I racked my exhausted brain. The hospital. Something at work. Something I did or didn't do. Then it hit me. 4 weeks ago, 1 week before the breathing started. A patient in the sleep lab. An elderly man, Mr. Harrison, 73 years old, and for a routine sleep apnea study. I'd been monitoring him from the control room, watching his vitals, his brain waves. Around 3 a.m., his oxygen levels had started to drop. Not critically, but noticeably. His sleep apnea was causing longer pauses between breaths. I'd made a note of it. Planning to alert the doctor when my shift ended at 6 a.m., it wasn't an emergency. His levels weren't dangerously low. I'd seen worse. But at 3:17 a.m., his heart had stopped. By the time I got into the room, by the time I started CPR, by the time the code team arrived, it was too late. He'd been without oxygen for too long. Mr. Harrison died at 3:34 a.m. The review board cleared me. They said I'd followed protocol. They said there was nothing I could have done differently. They said his death was due to an underlying cardiac condition. Not the sleep apnea, not my delayed response, but I'd known. Deep down, I'd known that if I'd acted faster, if I'd called for help the moment his oxygen dropped instead of waiting, he might have survived. I'd tried to forget about it, pushed it down, convinced myself I'd done everything right, but I hadn't. "The patient," I whispered. "Mr. Harrison. He died in my care." I didn't react fast enough. The breathing grew louder, almost wheezing now, and I remembered Mr. Harrison had seasonal allergies. He'd had that same slight wheeze on his exhale. You watched. As I struggled to breathe, you did nothing. "Sorry," I choked out. "God, I'm so sorry. I thought I was following protocol. I thought you were okay. I didn't know you knew. You chose to wait. Chose. Paperwork. over my life. He was right. I had chosen to finish my documentation, to follow the standard procedure, to wait until shift change to report the issue. I'd chosen efficiency over caution, and he died. "What do you want from me?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "What can I do?" The static grew louder. Feel. What I felt, the panic, the breathlessness, the darkness. Coming. That's what the pressure on my chest was. That's why it happened during sleep, during that vulnerable state. He was making me experience what he'd experienced, the terror of not being able to breathe, of being helpless, of dying while someone watched. "This has to stop," Professor Rodriguez said firmly. "Mr. Harrison, your anger is understandable, but what you're doing is slowly killing Marcus. Is that what you want? To become what you're angry at him for? Being someone who lets another person die?" The breathing stopped again. Long silence. Then no. "But he must understand. Must remember. Must not forget." "Won't forget," Professor Rodriguez assured him. "Marcus will carry this with him. He'll be better because of it. But you need to let him go. You need to let yourself go. This attachment to the living world, to your anger, it's keeping you from peace."
Oh.
"I don't remember. Peace is waiting for you," she said gently. "Beyond this, beyond the anger and the pain. But you have to choose to move on. You have to choose to let go." More silence. Then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "Will you remember me?" I understood what he was really asking. Would his death matter? Would his life matter? Or would I just move on? Forget him. Let him become another number in a file. "I'll remember you, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice breaking. "I promise. I'll never forget you. I'll never make that mistake again. I'll be better. I'll be the technician you deserve to have that night." The EMF detector began to drop. The static on the spirit box grew quieter. "Thank you, Marcus. I'm so tired." "Then rest," Professor Rodriguez said softly. "It's okay to rest now." The breathing came one last time, a long, deep breath in, like someone preparing to dive underwater. Then a slow exhale, fading, until there was nothing. The EMF detector flatlined. The spirit box went silent. The temperature in the room, which I hadn't even noticed had dropped, returned to normal. He was gone. I collapsed on the bed, sobbing. Professor Rodriguez moved to sit beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "He's at peace now," she said. "And so are you." But I wasn't. Not yet, because I knew that Mr. Harrison was right. I had failed him, and I had to live with that. End of part 1. The breathing had stopped, but Marcus Chen's journey was far from over. Because understanding why something haunts you is only the first step. The real healing comes from facing what you've done, making amends, and learning to forgive yourself. But can Marcus truly find redemption? Or will the guilt of Mr. Harrison's death become a different kind of haunting? Continue to part 2 to discover how. Marcus transforms tragedy into purpose. Part 2. The weight of breath recap. Hook. The entity was gone, released to whatever peace waited beyond anger and pain. But the truth that had forced me to confront remained. I had failed someone who trusted me with their life. Mr. Harrison's breathing had stopped. Now I had to figure out how to keep living with the sound of silence he'd left behind. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Not because I was afraid the oppressive presence that had haunted me for 3 weeks was truly gone. I could feel it, but because I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Harrison. Professor Rodriguez stayed until dawn, helping me process what had happened. Explaining the phenomenon from her research perspective, traumatic deaths can create what I call residual consciousness. She explained over coffee as the sun rose, especially when the death involves strong emotions, anger, fear, regret. Mr. Harrison's spirit, for lack of a better term, remained tethered to the moment of his death and to you, the person he associated with that moment. But why the breathing? I asked. Why manifest that way? Think about it, Marcus. What was the last thing he experienced? The struggle to breathe. The terror of suffocation. The slow realization that no one was coming to help him fast enough. That became his defining trauma. And in trying to make you understand, he recreated that experience for you. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, seeking warmth. I failed him. Yes, she said simply. You made a mistake. Not out of malice, not out of negligence in the criminal sense, but out of following protocol when you should have followed instinct. You chose procedure over immediate action. Her honesty was brutal, but necessary. How do I live with that? I asked. By being better. By letting this teach you something. Mr. Harrison's death doesn't have to be meaningless. You can honor his memory by becoming the kind of medical professional who never makes that mistake again, who trusts their instincts, who values human life over paperwork. She packed up her equipment before leaving, but she left me her card and a final piece of advice. Guilt can destroy you if you let it, or it can transform you. The choice is yours, Marcus. Mr. Harrison gave you a gift, even if it didn't feel like one. He showed you your weakness. Now you get to turn that into strength. After she left, I stood in my apartment, feeling the emptiness. For 3 weeks, I'd lived in constant terror. Now that terror was gone, replaced by something heavier, responsibility. I looked at my phone. 6 missed calls from Dr. Patel. I called her back. Marcus. Thank God I've been worried sick. How are you? Better, I said. I think I figured out what was happening. I need to talk to you. Can we meet? We met at a coffee shop near the hospital an hour later. Dr. Patel looked exhausted, her normally crisp appearance rumpled, dark circles under her eyes. I've been covering your shifts along with mine, she said. I'm running on fumes. But I've been so worried about you. You looked like you were having a complete breakdown. I was, I admitted, but not the kind you thought. Anita, I need to tell you something about Mr. Harrison. I told her everything, not the supernatural parts. She didn't need to believe in ghosts for this to matter, but the truth about that night. About the delay in my response, about the choice I'd made to wait instead of act. The review board cleared you, she said slowly. Are you saying they were wrong? I'm saying I was wrong. Legally, technically, I followed protocol. But morally? I should have called for help the moment I saw his oxygen dropping. I should have trusted my instincts instead of the chart. Dr. Patel was quiet for a long time, stirring her coffee, thinking. Finally, she looked up at me. You're right. You should have. And I'll be honest, Marcus, when I reviewed the case file after you went on leave, I wondered the same thing. Why didn't you act sooner? But I told myself you'd followed protocol, that the outcome would have been the same either way. Would it have been? I don't know, maybe, probably, but maybe not. And that uncertainty is what haunts you, isn't it? Every night. Or it was, until last night. What changed last night? I couldn't tell her about Professor Rodriguez, about the spirit box communication, about the entity that had haunted me, but I could tell her the truth that mattered. I stopped running from it. I acknowledged what I'd done. I took responsibility. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That takes courage. Most people would have just kept hiding behind the review board's decision. I can't hide anymore. But I also can't change what happened. So I need to figure out what I can do. Dr. Patel smiled slightly. I might have some ideas about that. Over the next hour, we talked about changes we could implement in the sleep lab. A new protocol that emphasized immediate intervention over data collection. A system where technicians could bypass standard procedures in emergency situations without fear of reprimand. Better training on recognizing subtle warning signs. We could call it the Harrison Protocol, Dr. Patel suggested. In memory of the patient whose case revealed these gaps in our system, you'd really do that? Marcus, you're not the only technician who has ever hesitated because protocol said to wait. This is not just about you. It is about making the whole system better. If something positive can come from Mr. Harrison's death, we should pursue it. I felt something in my chest loosen slightly. Purpose. This could be my purpose. When can I come back to work? I asked. When you are ready? Truly ready. Not just physically, but mentally. No more 3-week insomnia marathons. I think I can sleep now, I said. And I meant it. That night, I went home to my apartment. I stared at my bed and felt fear creep back in. What if the breathing started again? What if Mr. Harrison had not really moved on? What if there were other entities waiting to manifest? But I had learned something from Professor Rodriguez. Fear without action is paralysis. I needed to face this. I lay down with the lights off. No equipment monitoring me. Just me, the darkness, and the silence. I closed my eyes and let myself drift. I woke at 8:30 in the morning, sunlight streaming through my windows. No breathing, no presence. Just the normal sounds of the city waking up. For the first time in 3 weeks, I had slept through the night. I cried from relief, exhaustion, grief, and hope all mixed together. I stood in front of the hospital's medical staff. Presenting the proposed Harrison protocol, Dr. Patel stood beside me, lending her authority to the proposal. The key difference, I explained, pointing to the slide showing the new response structure, is that we empower technicians to trust their clinical judgment. If something feels wrong, even if it does not meet the technical threshold for immediate intervention, we intervene anyway. It is better to be safe than sorry. One of the older doctors, Dr. Kimura, raised his hand. Will this lead to excessive false alarms? Technicians calling codes when there is no real emergency. Maybe at first, I admitted. But I would rather have 100 false alarms than one preventable death. Would you not agree? The room was quiet. Then Dr. Kimura nodded. You are right. It is better to err on the side of caution. The Harrison Protocol was approved unanimously. That night, I visited Riverside Cemetery for the first time. I had looked up Mr. Harrison's burial location in the public records. His grave was in the older section, beneath a large oak tree that provided cool shade even in summer. The headstone read, Daniel Harrison, 1952-2023, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. His kindness was his legacy. I knelt beside the grave and placed the bouquet of white lilies I had brought. Mr. Harrison, I said quietly, I do not know if you can hear me. I do not know if any part of you is still aware. But I need you to know something. I am sorry. I am deeply sorry for what happened that night. You trusted us with your care, and I let you down. A breeze rustled the oak leaves above me. I want you to know that your death was not meaningless. We created a new protocol at the hospital in your name, the Harrison Protocol. It is going to save lives. Your death is going to help save other people. That does not undo what happened, but it gives it meaning. You did not die for nothing. I sat there for a long time, simply being present with the memory of a man I'd barely known but who had changed my life completely. I will never forget you, I whispered. I promise. As I stood to leave, I heard something that made me freeze, breathing deep. Peaceful breathing, the kind someone makes in their sleep. But this time there was no fear. It sounded like contentment, like rest, like peace finally found. The sound faded into the wind, and I knew that Mr. Harrison had moved on. Not when the entity left my apartment, but now when he understood that his death had meaning, that he would be remembered, that something good had come from his loss. I walked back to my car with tears on my face, but they were healing tears. The sleep lab became busier than ever. Words spread about our improved protocols, and patients felt safer coming to us. The Harrison Protocol was adopted by 2 other hospitals in the region, with more considering it. I became an advocate for patient safety in sleep medicine. I spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and trained other technicians. Dr. Patel joked that I had found my calling, but my real calling revealed itself in a different way. One evening, a young woman named Rebecca came into the lab for a consultation. She looked exhausted and haunted, exactly as I had looked 6 months earlier. I know this will sound strange, she said during intake, but I think something is following me. I hear sounds when I sleep. Footsteps. Whispers. I am afraid to close my eyes. Dr. Patel glanced at me. We had never discussed what truly happened to me. She still believed I had suffered a breakdown from sleep deprivation, but something in her expression told me she wanted me to handle this. I sat down across from Rebecca. Tell me everything. I promise I will not think you are crazy. She told me her story. It was different from mine, but familiar in its essence. Unexplained phenomena during sleep, escalating fear, deteriorating health, isolation because no one believed her. "Rebecca," I said when she finished, "I am going to tell you something that may sound unbelievable, but I need you to trust me." I told her about my experience carefully and honestly, about the breathing, about the presence, about learning it was connected to unresolved trauma and guilt. "So you think something is actually following me?" she whispered. "You do not think I am losing my mind? I think something is trying to tell you something. These experiences are often connected to things we have buried. Trauma we have not processed. Guilt we have not faced." "What happened in your life right before this started?" She was silent for a long moment. "My sister died," she said softly. 3 months ago. A car accident. I was supposed to drive that night, but I was too tired. So she drove instead. She fell asleep at the wheel. There it was. The unresolved guilt. The question that would not let her rest. "Rebecca, you need to speak with someone. A therapist who specializes in grief and trauma. I also know a researcher, Professor Elena Rodriguez. She studies these phenomena. She helped me. She may be able to help you." I gave her the contact information for Professor Rodriguez, along with the name of a therapist I had begun seeing myself. "This was not your fault," I told her. "Your sister's death was not your fault. But your mind is trying to process the guilt. Let us help you." She left with tears in her eyes, but also with hope. Over the next few months, Dr. Patel, Professor Rodriguez, and I created a referral network. When patients arrived with unexplained sleep experiences that did not fit conventional diagnoses, we had resources ready. Therapists, support groups, researchers willing to investigate instead of dismiss. We called it the Harrison Initiative. It expanded beyond the protocol to include holistic sleep health, including psychological and sometimes unexplained aspects that conventional medicine often ignored. 1 year later, I stood again at Mr. Harrison's grave. This time, his widow, Margaret Harrison, stood beside me. I had reached out to her months earlier, explaining what I was doing in her husband's memory. I expected anger or resentment. Instead, she thanked me. "Daniel would have loved this," she told me. "He always worried about people not being heard. About systems failing individuals. This would have made him proud." Now, on the anniversary of his death, we stood together. She placed flowers. I placed a framed certificate documenting the Harrison Protocol's adoption by the State Medical Board. "He is famous now," Margaret said with a gentle smile. "Not the way we would have chosen. But his name will be in medical textbooks. Every sleep technician in the state will learn the Harrison Protocol." "He saved lives," I said. "Even after his death, he is still saving lives."
So are you, Marcus?
Do not forget that. You turned your guilt into something meaningful. That takes courage. I thought about that night 1 year ago. The terror of hearing breathing that should not have existed. The weight of suppressed guilt. The presence that forced me to confront the truth. It had been the worst experience of my life. It had also led to the most important work I would ever do. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Margaret asked. "I did not used to," I answered. "But I do now," good, she said softly. "Because I like to think Daniel is still around sometimes. Watching over me. Watching over all of this. Making sure his death meant something." "I think he is," I said. "And I think he is at peace." We stood in silence, connected by loss, by healing, and by the purpose that had grown from tragedy. As we walked back to our cars, Margaret paused. "Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course, that night when Daniel died, did he suffer? I've always wondered, but the doctors wouldn't tell me details. I'd dreaded this question for a year. But I'd also learned that truth, even painful truth, was better than the lies we tell ourselves." "Yes," I said quietly. "He struggled to breathe. He was scared. But Margaret, he wasn't alone. I was there. I was with him. And in those last moments, I hope he knew someone was trying to help, even if I didn't succeed." She wiped tears from her eyes. "Thank you for being honest. And thank you for letting his struggle mean something. for making sure no one else struggles alone like he did. After she drove away, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about the journey of the past year, about how trauma can destroy us or define us, depending on what we choose to do with it. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca, who I'd been mentoring through her own healing process. 3 months, no episodes. Therapist says I'm making real progress. Thank you for believing me. I smiled and replied, proud of you. Keep going. It gets better, because it did get better. Not easier. I still carried the weight of Mr. Harrison's death. Still thought about him every day. But the weight had transformed from crushing guilt into purposeful responsibility. I'd learned to live with what I'd done, to honor his memory through action rather than being paralyzed by regret. That night, I went home to my apartment, the same apartment where the breathing had first appeared. I'd thought about moving, but I'd decided to stay. This place wasn't haunted anymore. It was where I'd been broken and rebuilt, where I'd faced my demons and come out the other side. I lay down in my bed, turned off the lights, and closed my eyes. For a moment, just a brief moment, I thought I heard breathing, but this time it wasn't frightening. It was familiar, peaceful, like an old friend checking in, making sure I was okay. Good night. Mr. Harrison, I whispered into the darkness. The breathing faded into the normal sounds of the night, and I fell into deep, dreamless sleep. Epilogue. The gift of BREA, 2 years after the breathing first appeared in my apartment. I was invited to speak at the National Sleep Medicine Conference, the same conference where I'd first met Professor Rodriguez. My presentation was titled, When Sleep Medicine Meets the Unexplained, a case study in holistic patient care. I told a modified version of my story, focusing on the medical and psychological aspects rather than the paranormal. Most of the audience wouldn't have accepted the full truth, but I talked about the importance of listening to patients when they report unusual experiences, about not dismissing phenomena we don't understand, about the intersection of guilt, trauma, and physical symptoms. The room was packed. After the presentation, dozens of sleep technicians, doctors, and researchers approached me with their own stories, patients who'd reported strange experiences, cases that didn't fit conventional explanations, phenomena that had been dismissed as delusions but might have been something more. You've opened a door, Professor Rodriguez said afterward. She'd been in the audience, beaming with pride. People are ready to have this conversation now. To admit that medicine doesn't have all the answers? I just told the truth, I said, about what happened to me, about what I learned. And that's more valuable than any research paper. Personal testimony. Lived experience. Transformation. That evening, I received an email that made me sit down in shock. It was from the Harrison family, not just Margaret, but Daniel's children and grandchildren. They'd created a scholarship fund in his name for sleep medicine technicians, pursuing advanced training in patient-centered care. They wanted me to be on the board. Daniel would want his memory to continue helping people, the email read. Your work has shown us how to do that. Will you help us honor him? I called Margaret immediately. Of course I'll help, I said. I'd be honored. Marcus, she said, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone else. What is it? The night Daniel died, actually, about 2 weeks after, I heard something strange in our house. Breathing. His breathing, I was sure of it. It happened every night for about 3 weeks, always around 3 a.m. Then it stopped. Did it frighten you? At first, but then I realized he was trying to tell me something. Trying to say goodbye, maybe? Or trying to work through his own confusion about what happened. I never told anyone because I thought they'd say I was crazy with grief. But now, hearing your story, I wonder if we were both experiencing the same thing. Margaret, I think your husband was trying to make sense of his death. And once he understood he saw that his death would mean something, would save others, he was finally able to let go. You probably heard him the night he found peace. That makes sense, she said quietly. The last time I heard the breathing, it sounded different. Peaceful, content. Like he was finally okay. We talked for another hour, sharing our experiences, helping each other heal in ways we couldn't have alone. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me here. An invisible presence had terrorized me, broken me down, forced me to confront my greatest failure, but that same presence had also saved me, had pushed me to become someone better, had given me purpose and meaning and a way to transform guilt into growth. 5 years later, final reflexion. Stood in the new wing of Riverside Medical Center, the Harrison Center for Sleep Medicine and Patient Advocacy. It had taken 5 years to raise the funds, to get approval, to build it. But here it was, a state-of-the-art facility, dedicated to holistic sleep care. The opening ceremony was attended by hundreds of medical professionals, former patients, researchers, and the entire Harrison family. A bronze plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of Daniel Harrison, his life reminds us to listen, his death taught us to act. His legacy continues to save lives." Margaret stood beside me, now in her late 70s but still sharp and engaged. "He's here. You know," she said, looking around the beautiful new facility. "I can feel him. He's proud." "I hope so," I said. "Everything we've built is because of him." "No, Marcus. It's because of you. Daniel showed you your weakness, but you chose to turn it into strength. That was your choice, not his gift." I'd thought about that a lot over the years. The entity that haunted Daniel's residual consciousness, his anger and fear, had forced me to face the truth. But what I did with that truth was my decision. I could have let the guilt destroy me, could have retreated into denial or self-pity, could have broken under the weight of what I'd done. Instead, I chose to honor his memory by becoming better, by making sure his death meant something, by ensuring no other patient would struggle alone the way he had that evening. After the ceremony ended and everyone had left, I stood alone in the center's main hall. It was quiet, peaceful, filled with evening light, and just for a moment, I heard it again, breathing, not frightening, not urgent, just a deep, contented breath, like someone seeing something they'd hoped for, finally coming true. "Thank you, Daniel," I whispered, "for everything, for being angry enough to make me listen, for trusting me enough to let me make it right, for giving me the chance to become who I needed to be." The breathing faded, and I really truly knew that Daniel Harrison was finally, completely at peace. His work was done. His message had been heard. His death had meaning, and so did my life, because that's what he'd given me in the end. Not terror, though it started that way. Not guilt, though I'd carry that always. But purpose, meaning the understanding that our worst moments can become our greatest teachers if we're brave enough to learn from them. I heard someone breathing right beside me. 5 years ago, it was the most terrifying experience of my life. It was also the moment my real life began, and I wouldn't change a single breath of it. The end.